I don't want a useless old woman here while I'm pregnant, Mara said flatly. Her eyes glued to her phone screen as if the glowing rectangle mattered more than the human standing before her. Evelyn Harper froze, her heart cracking quietly in her chest. Across the room, her only son, Jason, nodded in agreement without even glancing at her. "Mom," he said, voice steady and emotionless, "you should start looking for a new place. Maybe by the weekend." For a second, the words didn't register. Evelyn just stood there, 64 years old and suddenly homeless, staring at the boy she had raised alone for 30 years. The silence felt heavy, cruel, final. Then, with all the dignity she had left, she asked softly, "Jason, where exactly am I supposed to go?" Mara finally looked up from her phone, her perfectly arched brows lifting with cold irritation. "That's not really our problem, Evelyn," she said, emphasizing her name as if stripping away the title of mom gave her power. "We need the space for the baby's nursery." Jason shifted, unable to meet his mother's eyes. "There are senior communities, Mom. Nice ones. You'll meet people your own age." Evelyn almost laughed. People her own age. As if 64 was ancient. As if she were a broken piece of furniture that no longer matched the decor. She looked from her son to his wife and realized she was being replaced by a crib and a woman who had never understood what family meant. That night, as Evelyn lay in the converted garage they called her temporary space, she stared at the ceiling, remembering how it all began. 6 months earlier, she'd sold her 3-bedroom home to help Jason and Mara with their down payment. "It's only temporary, Mom," Jason had promised. "Just until we get on our feet." Foolishly, she had believed him. She'd cooked, cleaned, and even paid rent to live in that cramped space. She'd been there through Mara's morning sickness, through their financial struggles, through everything. She thought she was helping. Turns out she was just convenient labor disguised as family. But there was something about being underestimated that Evelyn knew all too well. She had spent her entire life being told she couldn't afford, couldn't manage, couldn't start over. Yet every time she did. So when Mara delivered her little eviction speech, Evelyn didn't argue. She just smiled faintly and said, "Fine. I'll be out by the weekend." Mara smirked, clearly satisfied. Jason exhaled with relief. They thought they'd won. But as Evelyn walked back toward her small garage room, a calm, dangerous sort of clarity washed over her. They had no idea what she was capable of. 3 days later, a moving truck pulled into the driveway, the hum of its engine breaking the Sunday quiet. Evelyn supervised the movers with quiet confidence. Jason appeared wide-eyed. "You found a place that fast?" he asked. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you're motivated," she replied, her tone sweet but firm. What they didn't know was that she'd been planning this exit since the first time Mara called her helpful. Her new apartment wasn't just a backup plan. It was an escape route. It was small, bright, and most importantly, hers. By the time she finished unpacking that evening, Evelyn felt lighter than she had in years. No more walking on eggshells. No more being treated like a maid in her son's home. She was free. As she poured herself a glass of wine, her phone rang. "Mrs. Harper," a crisp professional voice said. "This is Sarah Chen from Hudson Properties. Mr. Hudson wanted me to confirm your start date as property manager." Evelyn's lips curved. "Wonderful," she replied. "When do we begin?" "Tomorrow morning," Sarah said. "He's particularly interested in the property on Maple Street. 1247 Maple Street." Evelyn froze for a heartbeat. Jason and Mara's address. Oh, this was about to get interesting. After the call ended, Evelyn sat back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. She raised her glass to her reflection in the window and murmured, "Here's to new beginnings." She had met Will Hudson, a sharp developer with a vision for transforming neighborhoods, a few weeks earlier. When she'd mentioned her difficult living situation, he'd been intrigued. "That street's prime real estate," he'd said. "If the owners ever want to sell, I'd pay cash." At the time, she'd said nothing more. Now fate had given her a front-row seat to poetic justice. The next morning, Evelyn met Will Hudson in a cozy coffee shop 3 blocks from her old house. Will was in his mid-40s, confident, all charm and business. "Mrs. Harper," he greeted warmly, shaking her hand. "Your neighborhood knowledge is exactly what I need." Over cappuccinos, they discussed his plans to redevelop Maple Street into a luxury community. Property values would soar, but so would the taxes. "Now," Will said, sliding a tablet across the table, "you mentioned a particular house, 1247 Maple Street. Think the owners might sell?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "They're young, financially stretched, and that garage conversion. Definitely not up to code." Will's pen paused mid-note. "Unpermitted conversion?" he asked. "Almost certainly," Evelyn replied lightly. "And they've been struggling since the pregnancy. A cash offer might be exactly what they need." He leaned back, impressed. "Excellent work. Let's make them an offer today." 2 hours later, Evelyn found herself walking up her son's driveway, clipboard in hand. Through the window, she saw Mara's confused face as she spotted her. Jason opened the door, still in his wrinkled work shirt, looking exhausted. "Mom," he said, blinking. "What are you doing here?" Before she could answer, Will stepped forward with a professional smile. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell. I'm Will Hudson from Hudson Properties. This is my property consultant, Mrs. Harper." The confusion on Jason's face was almost comical. "You're what?" he asked, looking between them. Evelyn gave him a polite smile. "Property consultant," she repeated. "Mr. Hudson has a proposal." Mara appeared behind Jason, her belly round, her tone sharp. "What's going on? Why is she here?" Will's brow lifted slightly. "You know each other." "She's my mother-in-law," Mara said tightly. "Was," Evelyn corrected gently. "You told me to find my own place, remember?" The air thickened with tension. Will cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should sit down and discuss business." As they led him to the living room, the same one where Evelyn had once been called useless, she knew the tables were about to turn. Evelyn sat down in the armchair she had never been invited to use when she lived there. Mara stood stiffly by the doorway while Will spread out the papers on the coffee table. "I'll get straight to the point," he said smoothly. "Hudson Properties is prepared to offer you $450,000 cash for this property, closing within 30 days. Mara's mouth fell open. Jason blinked, visibly stunned. We're not looking to sell," he stammered. "Of course," Will said politely. "However, I should mention that your street has been selected for redevelopment. New infrastructure, updated sewage systems, fiber optics, the works. It'll be quite the transformation." Evelyn watched silently as realization dawned in their faces. "Redevelopment," Mara repeated. "You mean construction? Noise? Bulldozers?" "Exactly," Will replied. "It's all part of the city's improvement plan, and naturally, during the process, every property will be inspected for code compliance." Jason swallowed hard. "Code compliance?" "Yes," Will said, nodding. "Especially with garage conversions or structural changes. The city requires everything to be properly permitted before work begins." Mara shot a quick, frightened look at Jason, who suddenly looked like he might faint. Evelyn sipped her tea calmly, pretending not to notice their panic. "How long do we have to decide?" Mara finally asked. "Our offer stands until Friday," Will said pleasantly. "After that, living here will become inconvenient." When the meeting ended, Evelyn rose gracefully from her chair. "Take care, you two," she said kindly. "I do hope everything works out." Outside, the spring sunlight glowed across the street as Will shook her hand. "Brilliant job," he said quietly. "You know exactly how to read people." Evelyn smiled. "I just know my family." As they drove away, she caught sight of Mara's pale face in the window, her hands gripping her phone tightly. The guilt that Jason had tried to bury was now crawling to the surface. It was almost poetic. For years, Evelyn had been the one cleaning up his mistakes. This time she didn't have to. Life was doing it for her. Back at her apartment, Evelyn's phone buzzed relentlessly. Jason's number flashed again and again. She ignored the first 2 calls, letting them sink in the silence she'd endured for months. When the third came, she finally answered, her voice composed. "Hello, Jason." His tone was frantic. "Mom, what's going on? That man is talking about tearing up the neighborhood." "He's talking about improving it," Evelyn corrected calmly. "Rising property values are good for everyone. We don't want to sell." Jason shouted. "We just bought this house." Evelyn's voice softened, but her words were sharp. "With my $40,000, remember? The money I'll never see again." The line went quiet. When Jason finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Mom, we know we hurt you." Evelyn gave a humorless laugh. "Hurt me? No, Jason. You made a choice. You decided I was disposable the moment I stopped being useful." "It wasn't like that," he insisted. "Mara was stressed, the pregnancy. Don't you dare blame hormones for cruelty," Evelyn cut in, her voice suddenly cold. "Your wife showed me who she was, and you stood by her side while she did it." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. "So what now?" Jason asked quietly. "This is revenge." "No," she said. "This is consequence." That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the city lights flicker like old memories. She didn't hate her son, she never could, but she needed him to understand. Actions had weight. Words had sharp edges. And sometimes they cut deeper than people realize. When her doorbell rang the next morning, she almost expected it. Through the peephole she saw Mara. Mascara-streaked, eyes red and swollen. Evelyn opened the door slowly, arms folded. "Please," Mara said, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. I was angry, tired, scared. But you can't ruin our lives because I said something mean." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Mean," she echoed. "That's an interesting word for what you did." Mara sniffed, tears clinging to her lashes. "I said I was sorry." "You said you were sorry because you need something," Evelyn replied quietly. "That's not the same thing." Mara shook her head, desperate. "We'll pay you back for what you gave us." Evelyn almost smiled. "With what money? You're living paycheck to paycheck, Mara. You can't even afford the taxes once the redevelopment begins." Mara's shoulders slumped. "Then tell us what to do. How do we fix this?" Evelyn studied her for a long moment. "You want to know how to fix it?" she asked softly. "You can't unring a bell, sweetheart. Some things can't be undone." For a long moment neither woman spoke. The sound of distant traffic filled the silence between them. Then Mara's face hardened. "So that's it. You're going to ruin us because your feelings got hurt." Evelyn's tone didn't waver. "My feelings got hurt when your words told me I was worthless. When you and my son decided my only value was cooking and cleaning. I sold my home to help you, and you threw me away like trash." Mara's lips trembled. "We were wrong," she whispered. "But please. We have a baby coming." Evelyn sighed. "Then maybe this is your lesson to grow up before the baby does." Mara's phone buzzed. She glanced down, and her expression twisted in fresh panic. "Jason's on his way," she said. "Good," Evelyn replied. "It's time we all had an honest conversation." 10 minutes later, Jason burst through the door. "Mom," he cried. "Mara said you admitted you set this whole thing up." Evelyn stayed calm. "I admitted no such thing. I simply told her I was consulting with Mr. Hudson on neighborhood development. Your property just happened to qualify." "That's the same thing," Jason shouted. "No, Jason. It's not. I didn't create the storm. I just stopped shielding you from it." Jason frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" Evelyn turned, opened a drawer, and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "It means the city already planned to redevelop Maple Street. 6 weeks ago, they sent notices to every homeowner." She handed him the first paper. His eyes widened. "We never got this." "You did," she corrected. It was sent to your old address and forwarded to your real estate agent. Since my name was on your mortgage paperwork, they contacted me. I was handling it quietly. You'd have been fine if you hadn't decided I was in the way." Jason's mouth fell open. Mara stood motionless, realization dawning. Evelyn folded her arms, her voice calm but unyielding. "You thought you threw me out, Jason. But all you did was remove your safety net." Jason's face drained of color as he stared at the document in his trembling hands. This says the city's inspectors are reviewing every home for code compliance," he murmured. Evelyn nodded. "That's right. And they would have found your unpermitted garage conversion eventually. I was working quietly with a contractor to bring it up to code. I didn't tell you because I didn't want to stress Mara during her pregnancy. You were fixing it for us," Jason whispered. "That was the plan," Evelyn said softly. "It would have cost about $8,000 and taken 2 weeks. That was supposed to be my moving out gift. A safe, legal home." Mara's hands flew to her mouth. "You were doing all that, and we kicked you out?" Evelyn's eyes glistened but her voice stayed steady. "You made your priorities clear, Mara. So I made mine." Jason sank into the couch, shoulders slumped, the fight leaving him. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Evelyn said gently, "you face the choices you made. Mr. Hudson's offer is fair. Very fair considering your situation. You could take it, start over, and learn from this. And if we don't sell," Mara asked, "then you'll have to bring the house up to code before the city inspection," Evelyn said simply. "That means permits, fees, and inspections. It won't be cheap." Jason looked down at his hands. "We can't afford that." Evelyn sighed. "I know." Then she added, almost kindly, "But maybe next time, you'll think twice before calling someone useless." The silence in the room stretched until it became unbearable. Mara wiped her tears, trying to hold on to her pride. "You're enjoying this," she accused. "You want to see us suffer." Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No, Mara. I don't want to see you suffer. I want you to grow up. By destroying our lives," Jason snapped. "By letting you face reality," Evelyn corrected calmly. "You're adults, Jason. Actions have consequences. I spent my life protecting you from them: bills, mistakes, heartbreaks. You thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. But I stayed quiet to keep you safe." She looked between them, her voice softening. "You stopped seeing me as your mother. You saw me as the help. And now, you're learning what happens when the help stops helping." Jason's jaw tightened. "We're sorry, Mom." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I know you are. But sorry doesn't erase the past." He ran a hand through his hair, desperation etched on his face. "Then tell us what to do. Please." Evelyn took a deep breath. "You can start by selling the house. Take the profit, pay your debts, and move somewhere you can actually afford. You'll have peace, and maybe one day we can rebuild what's left of this family." Mara shook her head violently. "No. I won't let her take everything from us." Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't take anything, Mara. You gave it away." When they finally left, the apartment felt too quiet. Evelyn sat at her dining table, staring at the folder still open in front of her. She hadn't planned for things to go this far, but maybe it was necessary. People rarely change when life is comfortable. The next day, she met Will Hudson again to finalize her inspection report. "You were right," Will said, flipping through his notes. "That property's a mess. They'll either sell or drown in expenses." Evelyn nodded, keeping her expression neutral. "I imagine they'll come around." Will glanced at her. "You sure you're okay? This is your family we're talking about." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes, family needs to fall before they learn how to stand." Over the next few days, Jason called several times. Evelyn didn't answer. Then he texted, "Mom, please. Can we talk?" She deleted the message but couldn't stop thinking about it. Every motherly instinct told her to fix it, to make it right. But this time she didn't intervene. Instead, she focused on her new work. She inspected houses, wrote reports, met with contractors. People respected her now, listened to her opinions, even thanked her. After years of being treated like an extra body in someone else's home, Evelyn finally felt seen. And yet, a quiet ache lingered in her chest, the ache of motherhood that never truly fades. Friday morning arrived. The deadline Will had given Jason and Mara. Evelyn woke early, made herself tea, and waited. Sure enough, her phone rang just after 9. Jason's voice was tight with exhaustion. "Mom will sell. But can you please ask that man to give us a few extra weeks? We need time to find a place." Evelyn hesitated, her heart tugging in two directions. "I'll speak to him," she said finally. Jason exhaled in relief. "Thank you, Mom." "Don't thank me yet," she replied quietly. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I refuse to let my grandchild start life in chaos." That afternoon, Evelyn met Will again at the Hudson Properties office, a sleek space filled with glass walls and city views. "They've decided to sell," she informed him. "But they need 2 extra weeks before closing." Will nodded. "That's reasonable. I'll adjust the timeline." Then he smiled. "You know, Mrs. Harper, you've got a rare combination, kindness and strategy. Ever consider a permanent role here?" Evelyn chuckled. "At my age. At your experience," he corrected. "You're exactly the kind of woman who gets things done." For the first time in months, she felt proud, not just of what she'd accomplished, but of who she'd become. When Evelyn returned home, she sat by her window, watching the sunset wash the city in gold. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Jason. "Thank you, Mom. I don't deserve your help, but I'll make it right someday." She read it twice before replying simply, "I hope so, Jason. For your family's sake." Then she set the phone down and smiled to herself. Life had a funny way of teaching lessons. Some people learn through love, others through loss. Jason and Mara were finally learning both. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. A week later, Evelyn stood outside 1247 Maple Street one last time. The sold sign gleamed under the morning sun. Mara and Jason loaded the last of their boxes into a moving van. They both looked worn, humbled, but somehow lighter. "Mom," Jason said softly, walking toward her. "Thank you for everything." Evelyn smiled. "Take care of your family, Jason. That's all I ever wanted." Mara approached quietly, her eyes wet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For all of it." Evelyn nodded. "I know. Just don't make the same mistake twice." As the truck pulled away, she watched them disappear down the street, the same street where she'd once been thrown away. Only this time she was the one walking away stronger. The house that had once felt like a symbol of betrayal now stood behind Evelyn as a quiet reminder of transformation. As she drove back to her apartment, she thought of all the times she had cleaned that kitchen, folded laundry in that garage, or listened to Mara complain about nothing. Now it was over. Freedom felt different when it was earned through pain. That night, she cooked herself dinner. Real dinner with candles, music, and a glass of wine. She lifted her glass toward the window and whispered, "To peace." The city outside shimmered with lights, and for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel invisible. She felt powerful. A week later, Will invited her to join a property tour. "I value your eye for detail," he said. "You catch things most people miss." Evelyn joined him, clipboard in hand, walking through dusty hallways and old backyards. Each house told a story of neglect and second chances. "You ever think of flipping your own property?" Will asked casually. "You've got the instincts." She smiled. "Maybe one day. For now, I'm just enjoying sleeping through the night without someone calling me at 6 a.m. for breakfast." He laughed. "Fair enough. But mark my words. You've got a future in this, Evelyn." Meanwhile, Jason and Mara settled into a modest rental on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, peeling paint, creaky floors, but it was theirs. Jason picked up extra shifts at work, while Mara tried to make peace with her new reality. Late one night, Jason stared at their small living room and said softly, "We did this to ourselves." Mara didn't answer right away. I miss your mom, she admitted finally. I miss how she used to hum while she cooked. Jason nodded, guilt clouding his face. She deserved better from us. She deserved respect, Mara said quietly. And maybe now we finally understand what that means. Back at her apartment, Evelyn found herself slipping into a routine that felt almost joyful. She'd wake early, make coffee, review property reports, and call her new colleagues. On Fridays, she treated herself to brunch at a cafe where the waiters knew her by name. Sometimes she'd scroll through old photos of Jason as a boy, messy-haired and smiling, and she'd smile too. The wound still ached, but it was healing. Life, she realized, wasn't about what you lost, it was about what you built after. And she was building something stronger than before. Her independence. One afternoon, she received a text from an unknown number. Hi, Mrs. Harper. It's Will. Need your help evaluating a new property near Willow Creek. Could use your expertise. Evelyn smiled at the message and replied, of course. When? 10 minutes later, he sent the address. When she arrived, the neighborhood reminded her of Maple Street. Beautiful but aging. You see potential here? He asked as they walked the property. I see possibilities, she said. This house just needs someone to believe in it again. Will looked at her and said softly, kind of like you. She laughed. Maybe so. That evening, as Evelyn prepared her report, she thought about what Will said. People like houses fall into disrepair when they stop being valued. But with the right care and attention, they could become something beautiful again. She wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was reclaiming it. Her phone buzzed. It was Jason. Mom, can we visit this weekend? She hesitated for a moment, then typed back yes. Saturday afternoon. Her heart fluttered between nerves and hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Saturday arrived warm and bright. Jason knocked on her door first, holding a bouquet of daisies. Hi, Mom. Evelyn smiled, taking the flowers. Come in, Jason. Mara followed behind, slower, carrying a small wrapped box. I brought you something, she said awkwardly. Inside was a framed photo, Evelyn holding Jason as a baby. It was in an old album, Mara said softly. I thought you might want it. Evelyn stared at the photo for a long moment. Thank you, she said. It's beautiful. Mara's voice broke. I'm sorry, Evelyn. For everything. You didn't deserve the way I treated you. Evelyn set the photo down gently. I appreciate that, she said. But understand this. Apologies mean nothing without change. I don't want guilt. I want growth. Mara nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jason stepped forward. We're trying, Mom. Really? Evelyn looked at him, the boy she'd once carried through storms, the man who had forgotten her worth and now seemed to finally remember it. Trying is a start, she said. Then she gestured toward the table. Sit. I made lasagna. The simple words felt like a bridge being rebuilt one brick at a time. Dinner was quiet at first, awkward but peaceful. Mara helped clear the dishes afterward while Jason fixed the loose hinge on a kitchen cabinet. Old habits die hard, he said with a grin. Evelyn chuckled. You got that from your father. The mention of her late husband filled the room with a gentle silence. He'd be proud of you, Mom, Jason said quietly. You've built something strong. Evelyn smiled softly. I've learned strength isn't loud and steady. It's choosing peace over pity. Mara looked up. You really forgive us. Evelyn took a deep breath. Forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me. But yes, I do. When they left that evening, Evelyn stood by her window, watching their car disappear into the streetlights. The night air was cool, soft against her skin. She whispered, "Thank you," though she wasn't sure if it was to God, fate, or the stubborn resilience that had kept her standing. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Will. "You did well today. You've got a rare gift for turning endings into beginnings." Evelyn smiled, looking at the framed photo on her table. "Maybe," she whispered, "but some beginnings are worth waiting a lifetime for." And as the city hummed quietly outside, she finally felt at home, right where she belonged. The following weeks passed like soft chapters in a new book. Evelyn found herself smiling more. She joined a small reading group at the community center, made friends with other women her age, and even started taking evening walks through the park. She'd never realized how good silence could feel when it wasn't filled with loneliness. Sometimes on those walks, she'd catch herself thinking about Jason as a child, how he'd run ahead, turning to shout, "Come on, Mom!" Now it was her turn to walk ahead, and he was finally trying to catch up. Life had a poetic symmetry like that. At Hudson Properties, her presence became invaluable. Colleagues admired her precision and calm and Will often said, "You've got instincts money can't buy." She laughed it off, but deep down she felt a quiet pride blooming. "I just pay attention," she'd say. "Houses talk if you listen." Will smiled one afternoon over coffee and replied, "So do people. You just learn to listen better than most." Evelyn sipped her drink, her gaze soft. "I learned the hard way," she murmured. "People stop hearing you when they think you have nothing left to offer. But if you stay quiet long enough, they start realizing how much they miss your voice." One morning, as she reviewed renovation blueprints, Will called her into his office. "I've been thinking," he began. "How would you feel about managing the new development phase?" Evelyn blinked in surprise. "Me? You," he said firmly. "You know the area, you know the people, and, more importantly, you've got heart. You see homes, not just houses." Her throat tightened with emotion. "I don't know what to say." Will grinned. "Say yes." And she did. For the first time in decades, Evelyn wasn't someone's burden or background character. She was the architect of her own new beginning. That weekend, Jason visited again, this time alone. He stood at her doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes full of hesitation. "Mara's at her doctor's appointment," he said. "I wanted to see you myself." Evelyn stepped aside. "Come in." He sat at her small table, glancing around her cozy apartment. "You've made this place beautiful," he said softly. "It feels peaceful." Evelyn smiled. "It is. Peace takes work, you know." Jason nodded. "I believe that now." He took a deep breath. "Mom, I didn't just hurt you. I forgot everything you taught me. About respect, loyalty, gratitude. I'm sorry for all of it." Evelyn watched him for a long moment before responding. "You made a mistake," she said gently. "But it's the kind that can teach you something, if you let it." Jason looked down at his hands. "Mara and I want you to be part of the baby's life. We don't deserve it, but we're asking anyway." Evelyn's heart trembled, but her voice stayed calm. "That depends," she said. "On what?" "On whether you've learned to see me as more than someone who exists to make your life easier." Jason looked up, eyes glistening. "I have, Mom. I promise I have." She studied his face, the sincerity there undeniable. "Then we'll see," she said quietly. "Actions speak louder than promises." 2 months later, Evelyn stood in a hospital room, staring at the tiny bundle in Jason's arms. "Mom," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Meet your granddaughter, Clara." Evelyn reached out, her hands trembling as she cradled the baby. The infant's small fingers curled around her thumb, and something inside her heart mended that she didn't know was still broken. Mara watched from the bed, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world." And she meant it. Forgiveness didn't erase pain, but it made space for grace to grow. Weeks passed, and Evelyn found herself babysitting little Clara every few days. The baby's laughter filled her apartment with new life. Sometimes Mara would stay for tea, quieter now, gentler. She'd ask about recipes, about the best way to clean wooden floors, about forgiveness. "How did you do it?" she asked one afternoon, her voice small. "How did you let go of the anger?" Evelyn stirred her tea thoughtfully. "I realized anger is like holding your breath. It only hurts you. Letting go isn't about them. It's about choosing to breathe again." Mara smiled through her tears. "You're stronger than anyone I know." Evelyn chuckled. I just got tired of being weak as the months rolled on. Evelyn's role at Hudson Properties flourished. She managed inspections, oversaw remodels, and even trained new consultants. Will often joked, "You run this place better than I do." She'd laugh and say, "I just keep people honest." One evening, after a long meeting, Will said, "We're hosting a neighborhood appreciation dinner next month. I want you to be the guest speaker." Evelyn froze. Me? Why? Because your story is what this company is built on. Resilience, redemption, and rebuilding. She hesitated, then smiled. All right, she said. But only if there's dessert involved. Will grinned. Done. The evening of the dinner arrived under a velvet sky. The event hall sparkled with lights, filled with familiar faces. Contractors, clients, neighbors. When Will introduced her, Evelyn walked to the stage, her simple navy dress glowing under the warm lights. "Good evening," she began. "Some of you know me as the property manager. But before that, I was just a mother trying to find her place in the world again." The room quieted. "Life has a way of humbling us," she continued. "Sometimes it breaks us to remind us how strong we are. I lost my home once. Not just the walls but the people inside them. And in rebuilding my life, I discovered something greater. You don't need a house to feel at home. You just need peace." When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Will smiled from the audience, pride shining in his eyes. Jason and Mara sat near the back, baby Clara asleep in her arms. Evelyn's gaze met Jason's, and he mouthed, "I'm proud of you." She nodded, her heart swelling. Afterward, as people mingled and laughed, Will approached her with a glass of wine. "You were incredible," he said. "You've got a gift, Evelyn. You make people believe in second chances." She looked around the room, her family smiling, her new colleagues chatting warmly, and whispered, "That's all I ever wanted, for everyone to remember that even broken things can be rebuilt." After the dinner, Evelyn stepped outside for some air. The night was cool, and the city lights shimmered like distant promises. She leaned on the balcony rail, watching people leave with smiles on their faces. Will joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "For you," he said, handing her one. "No more wine. You've had enough praise for one night." Evelyn laughed softly. "Maybe. But it feels nice for once, being seen for what I've built instead of what I've lost." Will looked at her thoughtfully. "You know, Evelyn, you didn't just rebuild your life. You changed other people's too." She smiled, the warmth in her chest blooming like dawn. "That's the best kind of rebuilding there is." The next morning, Evelyn woke early, her mind still replaying the applause, the words, the quiet pride in her son's eyes. She brewed coffee and sat by her window, where sunlight spilled across the table. The framed photo of baby Clara sat beside the one of young Jason she'd dug out of storage. 2 generations, 2 beginnings. She whispered, "Maybe I didn't fail after all." Her phone buzzed. It was Jason. "Breakfast. Just us." She replied, "Yes." 2 letters that carried forgiveness, healing, and love that had been bruised but never truly broken. They met at a small diner downtown. Jason arrived first, nervously stirring his coffee. "You look good, Mom," he said as she sat at a. "So do you," she replied with a teasing smile. "Fatherhood suits you." He chuckled. "I'm learning as I go." There was a pause, softer now, not heavy like before. "I used to think helping us meant giving up your own life," Jason said quietly. "But now I see. You were showing me how to live with strength." Evelyn reached across the table, resting her hand on his. "And you finally learned the most important lesson," she said. "Respect isn't taught with words, Jason. It's taught by example." As they talked, Jason's eyes misted. "I want Clara to grow up knowing her grandmother's story," he said. "The truth about what you did, what you overcame." Evelyn smiled. "Then tell her one thing. Life will try to take your worth, but you must never hand it over." Jason nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "I promise." When they left the diner, he hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that spoke of gratitude and understanding. For Evelyn, it felt like reclaiming something she'd thought was gone forever. The bond between a mother and her child, restored through pain, patience, and time. In the months that followed, Evelyn continued working with Hudson Properties, but she also began mentoring young women at the community center. Most of them were single mothers or widows trying to start over. "You're not broken," she'd tell them gently. "You're being remade." They listened because Evelyn didn't preach from comfort. She spoke from experience. She became known affectionately as Miss Evelyn the Fixer, not because she fixed houses, but because she helped rebuild hearts. Every story she heard reminded her of who she used to be, and how far she had come. One afternoon, Will visited her at the office with an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "A thank you," he said. Inside was a set of keys and a photo. "That's 1250 Maple Street," he said. "The one next door to your son's old house. It's been fully renovated. I want you to have it." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Will, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "You earned it. It's yours if you want it." Tears filled her eyes. "After everything that happened on that street, maybe it's time to rewrite what that street means to you," he said softly. And for once, Evelyn was speechless. When Evelyn visited 1250 Maple Street a few days later, she stood on the porch, letting the memories wash over her. Across the road she saw children playing, families laughing. Life had moved on, and so had she. The new house smelled of fresh paint and possibility. The sunlight poured through the windows, warm and golden. "New beginnings," she whispered. As she walked through the rooms, she felt peace. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. She wasn't taking anything from anyone. She was simply claiming the happiness she'd always deserved. A few weeks later, she invited Jason, Mara, and baby Clara over for dinner in her new home. When they arrived, Mara gasped. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Evelyn smiled. "It's home." They sat together in the dining room, laughter filling the air between clinking glasses and stories from the past. Jason raised his glass. "To second chances," he said. "And to the woman who taught us that family isn't about comfort. It's about courage." Evelyn's heart swelled as she clinked her glass against his. "To learning," she said softly. "Even when it's hard." After dinner, Evelyn tucked Clara into a small crib she had set up in the guest room. The baby cooed softly, her tiny hand clutching Evelyn's finger before drifting to sleep. Jason stood in the doorway watching. "You're her safe place," he said quietly. Evelyn looked down at her granddaughter. "Then I'm doing something right." He smiled. "More than right, Mom. You're her legacy." Evelyn turned, meeting his eyes. "No, Jason. We're her legacy. Because we learned, together, that love means taking responsibility, not control." Jason nodded, his voice low. "I'll never forget that." Late that night, after everyone had gone, Evelyn stepped out onto her porch, the cool night breeze brushing against her face. The street was silent, but her heart was loud with gratitude. The same road that had once witnessed her humiliation now stood as a symbol of redemption. She whispered into the darkness, "Thank you for the lesson, for the strength, for the peace." Somewhere, a wind chime sang softly as if answering her. And as the moonlight kissed her silver hair, Evelyn smiled, a woman reborn not from anger but from grace.